Dear heads on the wall, dear heads on the wall, always watching you. Hey! Dear heads on the wall, dear heads on the wall, always watching you. Dear hunter shot Bambi, Bambi took the fall, dear heads on the wall, always watching you. Yeah. You're not paranoid if they're out to get you. You're not paranoid if they're out to get you.
That today is March 14th, and as you can see, I started last week with weird conditions around here, and following the same seasonal change of themes. For those not in the Northeast, Monday and Tuesday of last week were upwards of 79 if not 80 degrees, and as you can see, the snow level here has taken a little bit of a hit as a result of that. And again, for completely different reasons, I am stuck again saying weird conditions today, because although it has cooled off again into the high 30s, the heat wave of early summer teaser, whatever you want to call it, has pretty much taken a toll on the snow. It's patchy, but where it was up to my knees, it's now basically just something to step over, which I don't mind, because frankly, after getting 40 inches of snow in 2 storms in the course of 2 weeks, I'm good for snowfall. Anyway, let's get moving. We have a little more freedom of movement today, so hopefully I can take advantage of that, and I do have a couple of things on my mind, one of which is not necessarily Bigfoot related, although if you allow a certain amount of flexibility, I'm thinking it could
for the sake of being
that subject as well. It's a little more
repetitive,
topic, but we'll get moving and
orange
cover that
streak
when we get to it. So come on along
basically
and
kick the snow's
let's get
ass
going.
and put it into a hard retreat in here. And although when I came up here knowing it had been as warm as it was, I wasn't sure how much of a melt it was going to be. But I must admit, this is more than I expected. I expected there'd still be an inch or two on the ground, because there was a lot of snow up here. But it was also 80 degrees for 2 days, so don't let the door hit you on the ass on the way out. White Devil is pretty much the mood on my end. I did mention I had something to discuss, and this is grounds for a predisposed apology, because it is quasi political in nature. It could pertain to Bigfooting with some flexible thinking, but it's more a matter of privacy and the like. And that is the ever increasing encroachment of age verification into seemingly everything. The UK is demanding that people give up their age and identify themselves to get into things like Discord or pretty much any social media, which I can understand to a point. But I hate windy days like this, because you can always hear something crack in the distance. And is it an animal, is it something, or just something cracking in the wind? It is a day doomed to be of false positives. Back to the subject at hand, though. The one that rose on my radar last week, though, signed into law by a person in Colorado, but also by Gavin Newsom, who is a politician I have grown to despise because he is a pandering piece of shit that is the very typical career Democrat parasite that I can't stand. And I am not a right-winger or a Trumper. I am a proud independent, just to put that out there. I hate both sides, for the record. I'm more one of those curmudgeonly, they all suck kind of people politically. But that being said, he has signed into law. This isn't something coming down the pike. This is something signed into law to inspire other people who want to do the same thing. The reason why I call him a pandering piece of shit is what he's done is he has pushed age verification into the realm of operating systems. So think about that. Any new install of Windows on any PC anywhere, any laptop anywhere, any fucking cell phone anywhere, any device that requires an operating system, that's all kinds of shit, people. And you now have to give them your ID to get onto this thing, which is basically what he's talking about. And the principle in question that I'm going to point out, and if you disagree with this, I'm sorry, you're a fucking moron if you do. I'm not going to be blunt about it. I'm not going to mince words here. Whenever somebody who is a pandering piece of shit politician, parasite, waste of fucking air and skin tells you they're doing it to keep the kiddies safe, what they're really talking about is surveillance. Gavin Newsom and his ilk, and yes, he has an ilk, do not give two shits about the kids and their safety. It's about pandering to data brokers and people that are going to take your fucking information and use it any way they want, and the government in general tracks enough of your shit already. They don't, just by way of geofencing, freaking warrantless service by police, by cell phone towers that are called stingrays that are used by law enforcement, license plate readers, flock cameras, and freaking Amazon Sidewalk, where they're trying to turn your own Ring camera into a fucking surveillance net at your front door, mind you. All these things are trying to nudge us into accepting the existence every day of a freaking dystopian goddamn eyes everywhere police state. And I, for one, really think the government can frankly suck my you-know-what and freaking not have to be up in my business. I will not have that in on my property. If somebody has that on theirs pointing at me, I am going to actively freaking put a big light there to freaking make it hard for that thing to work. I will actively interfere with it, law notwithstanding. There are some points where the law does not have a practicality and therefore can suck it. There are those of you out there that are Karen-esque that might disagree. Well, that's too fucking bad. But yeah, you have any operating system, so now even though you're fucking, in my case, well past 21, they want your ID to sign on to Windows. As if Windows 11 does not freaking track enough of your shit inherently because of Microsoft snooping anyway. Think about that. Privacy matters, folks. And let's just say, for the sake of, so a couple of people on YouTube and possibly Facebook in the Bigfoot community, not recently, but once upon a time, had Bigfoot material flagged because it was flagged as fake news. Now, the subject of Bigfoot is not universally accepted by the public as fact, and the whole point of the subject is it is a bit of a mystery and or a phenomenon. But when you start having censorship-happy governments defining what is and is not real and censoring that subject matter, suddenly your little hobby of monkey hunting becomes something a little bit more problematic because they're telling you to fuck off. You can't do that anymore. And my question to them would be, what harm is the interest in the subject doing to them? And why is it their fucking business? I'm going to stop from going into a deeper political rant about the party system, but needless to say, this encroachment on privacy should be opposed. All you need to do is watch what's happening in the United Kingdom, where you have literally seen an allegedly free country become a little dystopian woke shithole where, and yes, I am not woke, don't, for those who are, fuck off. Let me just be blunt. For those of you who are watching over there, you can now go to jail, even for the night, even if they drop charges later. You can spend a night in jail because you did not appreciate the way a private school was handling your diabetic son's freaking treatment in a freaking allegedly private freaking WhatsApp room. This is something that actually happened. Somebody in the group ratted out the parents as if this is anyone's business other than the parents. And because the laws over there are so fucked up, the parents were called in for basically inciting freaking discontent and or violence and or whatever the hell, spreading alarm, whatever the wording of the law is. But it's the point of the matter is a law of that nature is so generally vague and open to interpretation that if the police decide they don't like you doing this, or a school administrator doesn't like the bad press, all of a sudden they can call the alarm on you and the cops come and take you to jail for the night. If for no other reason, to make the process the friggin' punishment, if you've heard that term before. Basically, you said something perceived by somebody to be out of turn, and how the fuck dare you? You get to spend the night in jail to think about what you did. It's like they give you your little time out for the government to wag its finger at you for having an opinion that you don't like. Now, flash forward that over to America, and under Biden and or Kamala had she won, and you're not on board with certain diversity concerns or gender politic related things, you can get spanked over here for that, under that guidance. And I say this from having worked in a school system before, where I know for a fact that you were subjected to mandatory training for LGBTQ awareness. And it's one thing to handle it in a given way that's impartial, but when, on the one hand, if you say something where you disagree with gender politics on any level, you're effectively threatening your job, and in that environment, don't get me wrong, you are. It is a subject, it is a non-subject to bring up if you value job security in that environment, in a blue environment. I have seen that firsthand. However, let's play both sides, because it's only fair. By the same token, right now, if you are a left-leaning person and you don't like the current immigration crackdown, and you are I mean, if you want to go to the extreme and you're an active ICE observer and you are protesting ICE, ICE is watching, and they have a surveillance network that is not to be underestimated with that big fat freaking budget push they got recently. And they want to know who's online, who is criticizing them, because there's one example of a person who was granted an extreme example of someone who was following them around their community and basically being a pain in their ass. But ICE got into their business online and basically flagged them so that they are now on a no-fly list. And why did they do that? They did that to intimidate her and shut her the fuck up. The left is doing this, the right is doing this, and it's not a matter that is right or left-wing partisan. Any pandering, parasitic piece of shit that's hiding in the form of a politician, and I'm saying this right-wing or left-wing, their motivations are not to keep the kids safe. It's about surveillance. They have potentially different motivations for surveillance, but it's about surveillance. Do not kid yourself. End rant. Moving on to looking around for Bigfoot stuff out in the woods, but that is on my mind because that popped up. And the reason why is I am not the biggest fan of Windows and I use Linux, and the question that's popped up in the Linux community and how it applies to that subject for anyone who's curious. With Windows 10 and 11, possibly earlier models too, you are bothered up the wazoo to connect your computer to a Office 365 or at least a Outlook.com account I'm presuming you can possibly do so and then set up something later, but they really push hard. If you're on an Android phone, they want your Google, your Gmail account. If you are on an Apple account, they probably are shoving some kind of apple.com email on you. And you have to be kind of a techie to know that you can use something like Lineage OS or one of its derivatives, which is Android, without Google. A de-Googled freaking Android that's more anonymous. If A, you have the right supported model of phone, and you enable things like developer options so that you can sideload that operating system. The bad news being, if you fuck it up, you're going to probably brick your phone, which is why don't do it on your main phone if you need that for work. And if it's a work device, clearly don't do it because it's not yours. I say that as an IT professional. For the people that think that that computer that your company gave you is yours, look down in the corner and see the little asset tag on there, and that's your little reminder, no, that belongs to the company and not you. And they have a compliance policy, and if you break it, you're going to probably be fired, which is why you don't do that. Anyway, the problem when it comes to that situation with Linux, not Android, which is a mutant Linux, but Linux itself. Linux does not require you to log into Office 365 or apple.com or Google. And you can just load the damn thing up, go next, install, and you have an operating system going in there that you have control over. This is a good thing. It also, as a matter of fact, first of all, I don't see how this age verification law is going to do anything meaningful to Linux realistically, because Linux, if you know anything about it, is an operating system that has what they call distributions, and there are hundreds of distributions out there. It is an amorphous beast that does not follow the rules that closed source Windows stuff does, or Mac. Resultingly, trying to regulate it in the same way does not fit. See, where I'm going right now has been a favorite for Bambi. Right there to right there. And why? Because if you fall, I wasn't going to attempt this with the snow being deep, because you're going to fuck up and get your feet wet, and it's cold. Or it was cold. Now it's a little better, although I'm going to mind that one spot because it's still like hard slipping in the water. But so the question being raised for it was begun with a company called System 76, which puts out a Linux variation called Pop! OS. And basically they're being legally told by Gavin Newsom and his little sycophantic bunch of shithead little lefty scumbags that, as opposed to the right-wing maggot fucking scumbags, as in you're all scumbags, fuck you all, but anyway, that if you were to install this and you don't give up your driver's license or like information to have that on your computer, despite the fact that you're probably over 18 anyway, you're a criminal. Fuck Gavin Newsom and his pretty little haircut. And if you've ever seen him being interviewed, I'm going to beat on him because I don't like him. I detest him on the same level that I detest Chris Murphy, who can also go fuck himself. There's some deer poo because we're going to keep this semi-woodsy. There's the X I walk by. I wonder if they took down their trail cam. Looks like they did. But it raises the question, okay, so you can't distribute this operating system in this state, and if you have more little faggy states that want to freaking shove surveillance down your throat, because again, this is not about the kids. This has nothing to do with the kids. What it is a Trojan horse. It is a litmus test to see how many people will comply with this fuckery in order to get them to then go to the next step, which is straight up surveillance. We need your passport, your information for you to use this technology otherwise. And the thing of the matter is, Linux does not have the need to have an account attached to it. You can have You can have an account local to the machine, which does not serve Gavin's purpose. May he fucking die in hell. But the fact is that the reason why this is not going to ultimately succeed, no matter if it does have wider adoption or not, is because, one, here's a reality check on the reality of Linux. Number one, your financial systems are running on Linux. Your infrastructure is running on Linux. You may have Windows servers in your enterprise, in your corporate job, but they're probably running in a virtualized host, and that virtualized host is most likely ESX. And guess what ESX is? That's a mutant Linux. When it came down to the wars of OS that were more prevalent during the pre-cloud era of IT, just to give you a little IT lore, Linux won the war very nicely, very graciously, and very quietly by literally becoming every fucking thing that Windows was not. Windows clung to the desktop, the laptop, and the server. Yes, they have Hyper-V to compete with VMware and with Broadcom's acquisition of VMware and basically fucking over all the smaller business space. Hyper-V does not scale to the level that other things like VMware or Nutanix or other storage-related things out there. It just does not have the same capacity to do so. No matter what that little marketing guy from Microsoft tells you. He's lying. Why? Because Microsoft does that. They love their FUD, but getting back to my point, financial shit runs on Linux. Infrastructure shit runs on Linux. The cloud, Azure included, Microsoft's own cloud, runs on Linux. Virtualization layers run on Linux. Some routers, switches, and things run on Linux. Smartphones is the grand fuck up of all time for Microsoft. How many people have Windows on their phone today? You have an Android or you have an iPhone. Android is a mutant Linux. If you have an Android, you're running Linux on your phone for every fucking thing you do when you can't put your phone down when you're driving. You can blame the Penguin for that. If you have an iPhone, you are using a derivative of iOS, which is based on BSD, which is a coexisting cousin of Linux called BSD, and it is a Unix, not a Linux, but it's also not Windows. These little pesky things were designed to scale before Windows was a wet dream in the eyes of Bill Gates back in the early 90s. The ARPANET was running on Minix and other forms of Linux or Unix way back in the day. And they were built to scale to anything. It's a kernel with a bunch of drivers that can connect to a freaking Polycom phone, or a fax machine, or a smartwatch, or a smartphone, or a laptop, or a desktop, or a router, or a switch, or a VM, or a VM host. I think you get the idea. Or your smart camera, or your smart thermostat. Guess what's running that? Your Roku, guess what's running that? Your smart TV, guess what's running that? So Gavin is not going to kill or poison the environment because the simple nature of the many-headed hydra of what Linux is in its inherently amorphous form is not going to win over some little shithead trying to push a safety for the kiddies nonsensical bill, which is more about the precursor to surveillance, which he can go fuck himself for. Parasitical shithead that he is. If you take nothing away from this freaking video, take away the fact I despise Gavin Newsom for being the little pretty boy, fucking pandering shithead parasite that he is. Every person out there who's not a diehard Trumper, who still hates fucking Democrats, people like Gavin Newsom, condescending shitheads that they are, Chris Murphy and others. You can probably throw Richard Blumenthal in there too, who also claims false valor. False valor? You can throw him in there too. They are the reason why Democrats are despised on a certain level by pretty much anyone. Unless, of course, you're a fucking moron. That being said, I hate Trump too, so fucking. So everybody right now cheering me on because you think I'm a Trumper, go fuck yourself because I hate him too. They all suck. There's a tree break for you. But that's the reason why, I mean, and simply put, if it's like Colorado and California and you're in those states, Linux is directly downloadable from the web. What does that mean? You have what you call repositories. Some are in California, some are in fucking England, some are in Switzerland. If you don't like the one in California, you simply go out to another out-of-state one and grab it from there. And there's really nothing that Gavin Newsom can do to fucking do that unless you're going to start aggressively firewalling everything, and then people start using VPNs, and you start having a push like this. This is already happening in the UK, which is why I'm predicting this. And all you get there is somebody fucking going into a pointless game of whack-a-mole when it comes to hunting down VPN users. And here's the fun. If you don't want to use like a NordVPN or something like that, here's the fun. You can host a little server out there in the cloud, all your own, for $2, which I literally do through a company called Ionos. And you can have a VPN running there. You can run a VPN on your own fucking computer if you're running Linux. The software is open source and built right in, and you can freaking have it from there. You don't need a Nord. You can run your own. And you can bypass all that bullshit, and there's probably 7 to 8 ways off the top of my head that a person who knows Linux and is relatively technical has got to bypass this nonsense. It's all the other poor saps who are not technical that are going to get fucked in the meantime, and probably even be too ignorant to notice. Do you want them tracking your medical information? Your citizenship? Because ICE is watching that. Do not kid yourself. And ICE has taken some very shady practices, and of course they deny it. A American citizen from somewhere out west, a person of Turkish descent, but an American citizen, was taken into secondary by the Border Patrol and then sent to a freaking ICE detention center for the better part of, it was either 2 days or 2 weeks before they decided to let her go. And even then, they made her hitchhike all the way home and gave her no support to get there. This is an American citizen who was kidnapped by a government agency for no reason and no justification. No criminal history. She went home to see family in the motherland. That was her crime. And they thought that was odd. That was literally their excuse, folks. They thought her travel history was suspicious because she went to Turkey, which is an allied country with NATO, by the way. And in another case, they grabbed somebody who was a citizen, 14 years old, and held them for the better part of a month. Why? They were using them effectively as a hostage to get somebody in her family who was not a legal citizen. So now the government is taking hostages, and just to show you I hate the right too, what is the difference between Hamas and the U.S. government if they're doing this to people? None. I'm done talking politics because it's just going to get me, it'll just keep fueling itself. So back to Bigfoot. I have to go and watch the latest copy of Cull's podcast because he was like, there's a big flap somewhere in Ohio. And I don't know what the, I don't know what that is. I have to go and catch up with that. Admittedly, that popped up when I was in the middle of doing stuff, and I'll probably miss it next week too because I have an active work schedule. So I will apologize for the length of the political rant, but it's not without importance. And again, there have been more algorithmic policings of the Bigfoot subject where somebody decided it was fake news. So that raises a question on any one of a number of things. More than a few people think that the government's covering up Bigfoot and or aliens. Bigfoot's subject to debate, depending on who you talk to. Some people being more credible than others, but aliens have been covered up until such a time, and this is again a right or left wing thing. I'm not going to play favorites here. when the government starts talking about aliens and disclosure, the right question to ask is, what are you trying to distract me from? Because they're never going to come clean on what they do or don't know about aliens. That you should just accept that as a matter of course, because they're not going to. Be interesting to see what kind of changes are up here when I get up the hill here, because the snow has kind of made it a little bit impossible to get up this far. So this is probably the first time I've been up this hill in several weeks. And just because my mind is wandering, also in the coming weeks, some other spots nearby, old spots in Vermont, and there's a couple in New Hampshire I want to hit as the white devil fucking sucks wind and dies. You can tell I'm bored with snow. But getting back to like bitching about the algorithm, they some people had some of their stuff taken down because suddenly Bigfoot was fake news. Which does call the whole censorship / cover-up thing into a whole new level of, you know, what they want you to know versus what they don't want you to know. Unfortunately, these subjects are part of the of popular folklore. It ain't going anywhere. On a similar note, I'm not going to go too political on this, but there are a couple of people on YouTube right now, one of which is, his name is John something with a very Greek sounding last name. He is a former CIA field officer, a spy, or a former spy, who spilled the beans on Abu Ghraib back during the first Gulf War and all the stuff going on there. And because they were a vindictive little government, they gave him 2 years. So he has since gotten out and decided he likes to more or less tell all, and he likes making the podcast circuit. So on one podcast, he briefly talks about the government and aliens, which, being a former spook for the government, is an interesting thing. I have to observe today that also you don't have the snow to backtrack with today, so that way takes you there, that way takes you back, and there's a stone wall. That's your navigational aid for the day. If you remember it, that weird looking stump right there. Anyway, this guy made the comment that the CIA had no involvement in aliens. That was all handled by the military, which is interesting because the current government answer to Project Blue Book, Google it, I'm not going to go through all of UFO history, is an agency called the AARO, or AARO, the Aeronautical Anomaly Resolution Office, brought forth by some very interesting alleged video footage from Navy pilots who are encountering these tic-tac looking things that fly in ways that our billion-dollar freaking stealth fighters can't. That seem to have the ability to say, fuck you, gravity, we don't have to play by your rules, we're going to do what we want. And there's a whole sci-fi-esque theory behind their propulsion, which is neat stuff, but conjecture. It's almost as if we understand the how they do it, but we don't have the means to replicate it yet. Do I think the government has a couple of these things, and they're desperately scurrying to reverse engineer it? Abso-fucking-lutely. Absolutely. It is literally as plausible a fucking idea as any other. Because the U.S. has their Roswell. The Soviets have a couple of stories of having a chat with people that are not exactly from the neighborhood. And interestingly enough, I don't know how much of a grain of salt you want to talk about it, but before they fell at the end of World War II, the Nazis were saying the same thing. Insert your conspiracy theory as you see fit. But, man, this is a long-ass ramble. It really is. Anyway, I would be curious as hell to hear John's thoughts more in depth on the formation of this AARO, which my point in bringing it up is to kind of back up his word on this. The AARO is directly attached to everything the government is willing to allege, to use the proper sense of lawyer speak, is attached to the Navy. Hello, Moose Track. And what I don't know, and I should probably find out it from a forestry standpoint, there's a moose who comes through here, and there's a moose that comes from down there and goes at an angle down that way, down the hill and across the stream. Is it the same moose, or do you have a few in here? Like a moose and a bull and a cow, like a family unit, or multiple individuals? That would be good stuff to know the neighborhood. I'd also be interested in hearing John's thoughts on why the feds would or would not cover up Bigfoot. Not whether he believes in it or not, but if this thing were to hypothetically exist, would the government cover it up, and if they did, why? What would be their motivation? To protect Big Timber and their slut lobbyists that should probably be put on a wall and killed for destroying our natural world for profit? Not that I have an opinion there. May they fucking burn in hell. And again, fuck you, Gavin Newsom. The worst thing I could think that could be done to Gavin Newsom, or even worse, Keir Starmer, who's the UK Prime Minister, would be just strap them to a surgical table and shave their head while they scream. And no, I'm not threatening violence to a freaking elected official, because in this thing, much like a sheep getting shorn, they would not actually be harmed beyond the sense of their own ego, but fuck their ego. Anyway, moving on. This is why I don't like to bring politics up, because it's really hard to turn that muscle off once you start. Anyway, I think I probably do not have the clout to invite this guy on to discuss this kind of thing. I have no idea how he would react. He's probably approachable online, though. But he would be a fascinating conversation to have. And now I'm thinking about it. If you were to approach him on this, from a standpoint of what the hey, honestly, the worst thing he can really tell you is no. If you think about it. I think I have some homework for the afternoon. I do know he will not talk to you if you are in fact a lefty, because somebody recently who is an IRL streamer I know nothing about got the impression that he agreed to come onto his podcast. I guess he's trying to become a celebrity in the leftist space. He recently was told by his John guy that he was unemployed. Very polite, very eloquently said no thanks. He didn't tell him anything nasty, but he made it very clear that he did not like the cut of this guy's lefty jib. I wouldn't go on his podcast either, not that he'd want to talk to me for any particular reason, but having listened to some of his, aside from the fact that he abuses his dog, who was caught doing that, making him a piece of shit on a much more fundamental level, the guy is not somebody I would see eye to eye with, but since I don't do political talk show shit, that's really not something I'm going to worry about. So, moving right along, I'm just making that large point and probably dragging it a lot further than I should, but his take on why Bigfoot would be covered up by the government is an interesting conversation maybe to have. And what, if any, the CIA world would interact with cryptid stuff. If I can find this guy's contact information, I might shoot him an email. Just say, would you be willing to come on a Nobody's podcast and talk about this, just for the sake that I think you are a uniquely interesting guest that would have a very unique perspective to this. And if you could get some kind of a rep from the, like say, the Forestry Service or Fish and Game to come on, if they'd be willing to talk about that. Not from a tell us what you want to hear point of view, but like what actually is your position as I mean, you are actually right now a mouthpiece for the U.S. government. What is your stance on these subjects? Is it out there? Is it not? Does the government cover it up? Is it a taboo subject? Are you protecting the profit dollars of big timber by covering it up? Does the government not care? Is there a weirder reason than that? The mic is yours, sir. Oh, man. If they politely turn you down, you basically can ask and not. You can ask and be told no and not freaking advertise that, but you never know. I would like to talk to this John guy about the subject, if he was willing to be. Interesting thing being, he is a guy who has talked about a great many subjects. I think because of the subjects he has covered. I'm going to kind of sing his praises to butter. And yes, this is a self-serving endorsement of you, sir. At least let me be honest about that. Be transparent, if you want to call it that. The guy covers a lot of subject matters. He knows names in the intelligence space relevant to current day. I probably wouldn't want to talk about those things because I myself don't know enough about that I really want my name on that radar. But there's also another guy, thoroughly different background, but as far as like interesting podcast guests, I guess I'm throwing out my ideas that if I don't get to it, there are other podcasts out there. How about Ohio's great and all that, but maybe get beyond the immediate Bigfoot neighborhood and listen up on this. There's another guy, I got to find his name too. He is a nature conservation type guy who operates in the Amazon, and he has some absolutely fascinating stories to talk about his interactions out there with uncontacted tribes that have basically they've wanted food or they've let to die, as well as cartels in the deep Amazon. And this is a guy who, because there is some form of Bigfoot in the Amazon, he, like Jane Goodall, would be a fascinating viewpoint on the subject, mainly just because this is a guy who has spent time in deeper fucking jungle than, quite honestly, any of us likely will ever see. If I can find if I Google him or look him up on Facebook, I wonder if I could get his contact information and do 2 podcasts to see if I could get a podcast going. Because those are some large name guests. And if the Coles were to beat me to it, I would not be offended by that, because that's more his line of shtick than mine, doing podcast stuff. He's a little more polished in it. When I do it, it's basically, the last time I did, I basically interviewed him, and it was more of a free-form kind of discussion, but that's the way I do things. I don't have a set format because I don't do it often enough. Basically, I don't have enough to say I don't have the, I don't know, you can call it discipline or you can call it energy level to go out and find a different host every day, because I mean, I have some very blunt opinions on the subject. There's a lovely little tree break there. It's not hard to see how that happened. Basically, the inside of that bad boy was hollow as hell. Anyway, the reason I don't do a podcast is because, number one, I think there's a certain market for a Bigfoot related podcast, and Coles does kind of the hoaxbuster angle, whereas I look at it more from a scientific umbrella blanket kind of a viewpoint. I'm going to go this way because I can kind of backtrack through this. And so I think we do have a slightly differing approach, but I think you should be willing to talk to people who are potentially hard skeptics in the subject too. Otherwise, you are only getting one half of the story, and if you want truly balanced coverage of it, you should get both sides. Would I be willing to talk to somebody who's like thoroughly woo? Depending on the individual, or a hoaxer. I doubt that Todd Standing would be willing to talk to me because he'd probably want to control the terms of the interview, and that's not happening. But if he were to agree, he would be a fascinating conversation, despite the fact that I'd probably get my ass kicked in the comments for giving him a platform, quote unquote. Because I know that when Coles challenged him, I kind of had that thought with him too. It's like, why are you giving him a platform? And we had a spat one night. So if I were to do it, I'd be a hypocrite at that point, and admittedly so. One person I would not give a platform to, and you can be pissy or not, would be two, actually. I wouldn't give a platform to Matthew Johnson just because I think he has taken a tack on Bigfoot that is harmful, and I would not give that a platform. He basically has taken on a very cultish kind of approach to the subject, and I'm not going to feed that. On the same principle, I would not have a rabid Scientologist on for any reason either. I don't like the cut of their jib for reasons I'm not going to get into, because this is not an anti-Scientology channel. Google it and look up Operation Red. You can figure out the rest of that yourself if you haven't done that already. That being said, who else? MK Davis would be a problematic one. Just, I don't think. There was a time when he was actually respected as somebody with a good take on the subject, and then he went into his crazy period and started going into the massacre theory of the PGF film, and basically shitting on the reputations of some people that have a whole lot more clout in the subject than he does. Unless you're a skeptic, but then you're a skeptic and you've already decided it's not a matter of you believing it anyway, which is a whole different subject matter. But then again, that's somebody worthy of an interview, because then you get their side of this. And the challenge would be for them to go into enough of why they feel that way versus just like I said, it's not there, I don't believe in it, and I said so, that's the end of it. A lot of them are like that. The people that have a take on that, on the former JRF, the current International Skeptics Forum, that is their take on Bigfoot. It's not there, we said so, we're done. You can't really talk to somebody like that about that. So, too bad. I haven't heard a lot about Tom Biscardi lately, but I wouldn't give him the time of day, just because he sounds like a used car salesman, much like Rick Dyer. Rick Dyer, on the other hand, is an interesting person who I might be willing to talk to, mainly because he is a person who comes right out and says, yes, I hoax, and if you believe me, I sell used cars. What do you not understand? I could actually have a civil conversation with him on that understanding, basically just because he is not a hypocrite about the way he approaches the subject. He is a hoaxer, and he says so. He'll scold you for believing him. I have a weird backhanded respect for Rick Dyer that way. He doesn't pretend to be something that he is not. He's not a skeptic, he's a hoaxer, and he freaking has been a bit of a huckster, and he comes right out and says so. As opposed to Todd Standing, who is basically a bullshitter that is preying on the ignorance of other people for years now. You either see him for what he is, or you're stupid, in my opinion. David Paulides or like Steve Isdall, I'd be hesitant to as well, mainly just because they are, in my mind, hucksters as well, and I really don't want to give them a platform. Maybe that makes me a freaking hypocrite, but I don't. Assume it. We're at a point where I think I have rambled long enough about a lot of different shit, and we're going to take a break right now, and I'm going to go in here and look for some kind. There's some tracks back here, mainly Bambi and the odd moose track, but I want to see if there's anything more interesting in here, as I have not been through here in easily a month and a half, just because of the amount of snow we've had. You saw the last few weeks. Walking through snow up to your knees and going over a stream and all that would have taken me like 3 hours to get here one way. Just because of the navigational fun and games that it represented. Now it's like basically ankle deep and you kind of move through the stuff and kind of take a look for tracks. But again, I did say I was going to do a segment break, or at least strongly hinted at that. I'm going to do that so I can do that and not yap anymore. We will be back in a bit. We are down the hill, kind of rambled out. I'm not sure if I should apologize for the rambling nature of this one, but it was on my mind and I did talk on it for a while. It is windy today. It's kind of hard to gauge the temperature because when I got here it said basically 38. It's seemingly warmer now, so I'd probably gauge it in the low 40s, but with the wind, not really that bad. And again, you're not driving through. Last week this was basically 1.5 feet, if not more, of snow in some points. So getting around today, obviously not the burning of calories that we had before. And but otherwise we saw some moose tracks, we saw some deer tracks, nothing in the way of bears. Not that they're not out by now, because it has been warm and they do tend to wake up. The hibernation all winter thing is a bit more of a myth than it isn't. Bottom line, if it gets warm, a black bear's stomach will start rumbling and it will get up and look for food, and then go back when it gets cold again. That being said, a general overall lack of smaller stuff tracks though. So I don't know if they just laid low or if the snow was hard enough for a while. They just didn't leave tracks because they're not heavy enough to make a dent in what was a lot harder and more solid a while back. But this is where we are going to wrap this one up, barring something crazy happening on the way out. And we're going to say like, subscribe, hit the notification bell if you want to get more, and leave comments, death threats, criticisms, praise, suggestions as the mood strikes you, and we will catch you on the next one. Until then, bye.